A tree's root system will expand until it hits a physical barrier. In a confined space, that expansion exerts enough pressure to split heavy stoneware. Planting a tree on a balcony or a small patio is a long-term commitment of very specific, limited real estate. It's an investment of space that won't be available for anything else for years. The difficulty begins with how these plants are marketed. Terms like small or low height are often used loosely, grouping together manageable shrubs and aggressive trees that require significant ground depth. To see the trade-offs clearly, we plot the physical space a tree requires against the time investment needed to keep it healthy. This empty corner represents the ideal urban tree: zero room, zero maintenance. Finding a species that actually thrives here is the challenge. Ignoring these physical limits often leads to a choice between structural damage to the property or a plant that struggles to survive in a space that was never large enough to begin with. A list of 200 species is only useful once you have a way to filter out what your specific environment can actually support. Selecting the right tree requires a look at two specific variables: your available soil volume, whether that's a pot or the ground, and your primary reason for planting. Most choices fall into three distinct categories: trees grown for high-value produce, those chosen for sensory aesthetics, and those used for vertical privacy. Success in small space gardening comes from treating these lists as sets of operational requirements rather than just a menu of visual preferences. For those focused on utility, the options include high-yield fruit trees like lemon, guava, papaya, and dwarf caranda. These species have high input requirements. They need either a massive container or deep ground soil, paired with a strict, scheduled nutrient regimen to produce fruit. The payoff for that labor is significant, providing fresh, organic edibles from a very small footprint of land. This table compares those inputs. The massive soil and nutrient requirements are what make that high edible yield possible. However, without consistent pest management and perfect sun exposure, the system breaks down. If the inputs aren't met, the tree often becomes a non-fruiting foliage plant that still consumes the same amount of space. Fruit trees offer a high return, provided you are ready to actively manage the biology of the plant, rather than just letting it grow. If the goal is visual impact rather than food, the focus shifts to ornamental trees like hibiscus, frangipani, and night-blooming jasmine. These deliver immediate color and fragrance, providing an aesthetic lift to a patio without the years of waiting required for a fruit harvest. But there is a continuous maintenance cost. To keep these trees looking vibrant and within their spatial bounds, they require frequent, repetitive pruning. Beyond the pruning, the fallen flowers and leaves require constant cleanup. The visual appeal is high, but it necessitates a regular sweeping schedule to keep the space from becoming cluttered. There are also safety factors to consider. The oleander, for instance, is a common ornamental that is highly toxic, a significant risk if you have pets or small children in a confined area. Ornamental choices prioritize beauty over utility, which makes regular custodial maintenance a permanent part of the deal. Then there are the architectural choices, trees like Ashoka and Arbor Vitae, which are used primarily to build privacy screens. Their value is their shape. They provide a dense vertical barrier without taking up much horizontal room on a patio or deck. This illustrates the risk of planting a single species in a tight row. If one tree catches a disease or an infestation, it can move down the line quickly, potentially killing your entire privacy screen. We also have to look at the outliers in the catalog, specifically plants like the jackfruit and the banana. While often listed as small options, these plants actually require enormous amounts of water and lateral space. In a confined urban setting, they can quickly become unmanageable. These architectural trees are essentially permanent infrastructure. Getting the initial spacing wrong usually leads to a choice between total plant failure or the need for a difficult extraction later. To find the right match, you have to follow the path set by your actual constraints. The first distinction is your soil access. Are you working with pots on a balcony or open ground? For those on a balcony, the next step depends on whether you want a tree that produces something useful or one that simply looks good. If you have the time to manage a strict feeding schedule and want to harvest, the best options for a pot are the dwarf caranda or a lemon tree. If you prefer immediate visual impact and don't mind the regular cleanup of dropped blooms, hibiscus and jasmine are the more effective choices. For a backyard with ground soil, where you want the highest return on your investment, the evidence points toward guava or papaya. The common thread here is that the smaller the space, the more specific and deliberate your management of the tree must be. Finally, if you aren't interested in a maintenance schedule and just want some green in your space, you have to be honest about that commitment. In that case, choose low-maintenance options like arborvitae or periwinkle and avoid anything that bears fruit. A fruit tree that isn't pruned or harvested quickly stops being an asset and becomes a biological burden on a small space. Long-term success is a matter of matching your choice to the physical reality of your space rather than the ideal images found in a catalog.